Hello, Galarian. Welcome to Online at 6. This is the podcast where you get to hear a group of nerds cover fun concepts, wacky builds, and interesting Pathfinder 2 rules, mechanics, and subsystems. We'll debate, argue, make terrible puns, and hopefully produce some kick-ass content that will blow your mind. I'm Saebedee, a lovely gnome cleric of Desna, reporting live from a maze. Today, I'm joined by...
Hi, I'm Greenmeadow. You've probably heard of me. I'm your friendly, local, immortal Leshy. I've been through it all, from Earthfall to the fall of Last Wall. You could say I've seen some things, I know some things, a lot of things.
Hey, I'm Saphira. I grew up here in the puddles of Absalon. I can be your tour guide. Ooh, you look really pale. Did you fail a saving throw or something? Don't worry, I've got just the thing for you right here. What? No, this isn't a scam.
I'm Nock, the local dwarf alchemist, ready to make anything you need.
And my name is Liam, owner and purveyor of the local magic item shop and full-time Lich.
Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Online at 6. In this episode, we wanted to introduce ourselves and give you a sense of our experience and the characters we'll be representing throughout this podcast. I'm Elizabeth, and I'll be playing Saebedee. I'm this group's forever GM. We're one of those rare groups of TTRPG players that have played together every week for, at this point, years. It started out with 3 of us playing at a local game store in early 2018, and we slowly started gathering forces, creating our current group of 6. My first RPG experience was playing a few PFS scenarios in 2017, but I didn't really jump into it until 2018 when a few coworkers and I started playing 5e at the game store. When our GM moved, I became our forever GM and ran us through a few 5e modules until Paizo announced Pathfinder 2e, and I was hype. We waited to finish up our 5e campaign and officially switched over to 2e on January 1st, 2020 with Age of Ashes. We're now on book 6, we've been playing a little over a year and a half, and I'm loving it so far and have kind of become obsessed with it.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I'm going to be playing Greenmeadow. I started playing when we started playing at the board game cafe. I blindly followed my partner into what was promised to be, at least, one enjoyable time. And every week since then, or nearly every week, we've played, and it's been amazing. I have some experience since then, but most of all what I do is mooch off the fact that my partner is a walking, talking Pathfinder 2 rulebook. So that's where most of my knowledge comes from, but I try to learn some stuff myself.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm the newest addition to this group. I joined in late 2018, and I'll be playing Saphira Al-Jazeel, the chaotic neutral, but oh so lovable street urchin from the slums of Absalon, monk, archer, with a little bit of magic. Because that's the beauty of Pathfinder. You can do it all, baby. I joined this group in 2018 after I just moved to the city. Got randomly assigned to this wonderful group of misfits and have not looked back. As the youngest, I try to bring that youthful energy, and debatably every now and then I slip into a little Gen Z mentality, but it's debated. It's a hot topic. We'll cover it on some segment, I'm sure.
Hi, I'm Kendall, and I'm going to be playing Nock, who is our party's dwarf alchemist. We, like everyone else has stated, we started playing D&D 5e in 2018 at a local game shop and eventually transitioned into Pathfinder 2nd edition, which has been a great change, and I've been really loving the system and all the options that it has to offer, especially playing a new class, the Alchemist, which I've really loved.
And last but not least, my name is Eli. I will be playing Liam the Lich, owner and purveyor of the local magic shop. I joined this group about 2 years ago as well, when my partner Kendall met everyone at work, and she drug me to a Dungeons & Dragons game, which I never thought I'd play. I always was the person that said, oh, that's too nerdy for me. I will never get into RPGs. But then I tried it, immediately fell in love with the system. But then we started Pathfinder about a year later, and I never looked back. I have loved every part of Pathfinder, love the character building. I like how complex the items are, how much room there is to role play. I'm glad to be here, glad that we're getting the show started. And now we're going to do a deep dive into each of the characters we've made for this show. We're using this space to highlight a little bit about what we love within Pathfinder 2e. So each of our characters we've developed to highlight a different aspect of the game that we enjoy. So, Saebedee, you want to kick us off?
So Saebedee is an 8th level Enigma bard with a cleric dedication. This might be a little confusing since I introduce her as a cleric of Desna, but that's just how she introduces herself to others. In reality, she is a cleric to Grotus. She started traveling around attempting to discover why she started suddenly going through the bleaching, and determined through her studies that this is a direct prophecy of the end times. She became obsessed with Grotus and found that her outspoken interest in her and the speculation of the bleaching turned people off. When she decided to dedicate her life to his service, she realized she needed a way to weasel her way into parties so that she could have a direct influence on them, and of course spread Grotus's message. Thus, she decided to disguise herself as a cleric of a much more mundane deity, Desna. One of the biggest things I love about Pathfinder 2 is that this backstory can be directly reflected in the mechanics of her build, rather than just being flavor. At level 2, she picks up a cleric dedication, and after traveling as a cleric for a while, at level 4, she takes deceptive worship and starts disguising herself as a cleric of Desna. This could actually be taken a little earlier at 3 if you wanted, but I thought it was more realistic to take toughness first so she could survive a little longer. At level 6, she takes her deception one step further and takes false faith. This is a feat that is actually specific to a different deity and would require a little GM approval, but I personally think it allows to be used for any sort of deity whose worship is considered kind of fringe or turns people off a bit. This feat allows you to use a religious symbol of and pray to a different deity instead of your own by simply saying a prayer for an hour in the morning to your own deity. Your god then intercepts any prayers to that deity and does your spells and everything that you're looking for. I just love the idea around this fleet. It's pure flavor, but allows you to incorporate your RP into the rules of the game so flawlessly without a lot of work on the GM's part. For a little bit of extra flavor, instead of prepping heal spells, since it's an anathema of Grotus to artificially extend someone's life, Saebedee only preps harm and has wands of healing which he hides in sleeves of storage to use, only when absolutely necessary to keep up her front as a cleric to Desna. She believes Grotus is fine with this as long as it allows her to convert more followers to his cause. But honestly, whether or not Grotus actually cares is a completely different story. The false worship aspect of her build can actually come online as early as 4, but because she has other focuses such as using occultism for pretty much everything, and inflicting fear, which is honestly mostly to be an affront to the fact that she would ever worship Desna, her current build really comes online at 8, so she can pick up Bon Mot, the domain spell Waking Nightmare, combat reading, and disturbing knowledge. There are a few flavor options, such as picking up Doomsday lore from Gnome Obsession using the Ancestral Paragon feat, that can be skipped if you want to come online a little bit earlier, but I really think those are central to my vision of Saebedee.
Saebedee, what do you think really shines from this build? Like, what mechanically do you think that you can bring, both inside and outside of combat? What stands out to you?
Saebedee is really a kind of debuff person in combat. She's very good at kind of figuring out your enemy's weaknesses, as well as inflicting fear. That's like the thing she does best.
Nice.
She has got about 5 different ways of inflicting fear. So if you need someone scared, she's got you covered.
And for anyone out there that's not inflicting fear on opponents, it is pretty much one of, if not the best debuffs of them all. It's really great, and any chance you can get to inflict fear on someone just pretty much lowers all of their stats by 1.
I might have to give it to Slowed for best debuff, but Frightened is definitely up there. So now, Saebedee, let's just say for argument's sake that you're traveling with an entire party of undead, and then your harm spells start healing them.
Well, that's a good thing if they're in my party, right?
What does Grotus think about that? Is that artificially extending their life, I wonder?
Well,
it's tricky.
Undead, right?
That's also kind of artificially extending their lives, isn't it?
Yeah, they're already artificially extended.
I'm just over here wondering when the Necromancer class is coming out. That's all I want to know.
Calm down, Lich.
So for Liam, I asked myself what I wanted out of this character. I always start my builds asking myself, like, what exactly do I want to do? What do I want to try out that's new or different? And surprisingly, for Liam, I decided to go with an investigator with a scroll trickster dedication. Specifically, I started the build with Storm's Lash from the Tengu ancestry. I saw for Liam, he might want to have some spellcasting early on, especially since it was going to be a martial class. I know he's going to end up as a Lich at some point, but we're only talking about the first couple levels here. So I started him off with Storm's Lash so he can cast Electric Art as an innate cantrip, and also That's Odd from the Investigator class. I love That's Odd because it is an absolutely fantastic out of combat feat that you can use. It lets you, whenever you enter a room, you can find one thing out of the ordinary. And I think the Investigator class really shines with just these figuring out the situation scenarios that you're working through with your GM. So basically you walk into a room and GM has to tell you one thing that's out of the ordinary or something that has to do with the situation you're currently in, and it helps you connect the dots and figure out the story in kind of a unique way. I think this really highlights how Pathfinder has these feats built in. They're not just you deal an extra +2 damage to your attack, but instead it's like, oh, when you walk into rooms, you notice one thing that's out of place, and I love when feats can translate like that. Next, for second level, I took Red Herring, which is, I think, perfect for this group. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Red Herring. It lets you just basically ask your GM, hey, are we going down the wrong path? Are we looking too into this? Does your group do that too? Are you constantly following random leads and trails that have nothing to do with the actual plot? Red Herring might be for you. It just lets you ask your GM, hey, does this have anything to do with the story? And they will let you know. At level 4, I picked up the Scroll Trickster dedication, and this is where I think Liam starts to really come into form. I love the Scroll Trickster. I think it's a little undervalued right now because scrolls are cheap and they're just like basically free spell slots. You can start at level 3 and have access to 2 second level spells and 3 first level spells, and then just use your money to buy an extra 10 level 1 scrolls if you want, and you have those ready for you whenever you need them. So with the Scroll Trickster dedication, basically it automatically gives you Trick Magic item, which lets you use a magic item that you otherwise wouldn't be able to use. In this situation, lets you pull out a scroll, you can try to trick into using it, and then you can cast from it afterwards. So I imagine Liam at this stage has just a tool belt, his bandolier full of all of these scrolls for any random thing he needs. And despite not being a spellcaster, Liam's an investigator, he can still pull out a scroll, trick it, and use it whenever he needs. And this is also really great out of combat. So if you wanted to just load up on utility spells like create water, create food, anything like that, you can pull it off your bandolier, cast it. Most likely you'll succeed. The Scroll Trickster dedication also gives you a +2 to your check to trick the scroll. There is a check involved, but you're pretty much fine as long as you don't critically fail. And the Scroll Trickster dedication also makes it so if you do critically fail, the scroll isn't destroyed as it normally would be. At 5th level, I picked up the Long Nose form so that Liam as a Tengu can turn into like a more humanoid form and, walk amongst a crowd, maybe be a little less spottable, look a little less different, helps him blend in and look like everyone else. And then lastly, at level 6, I picked up Predictive Purchase, which for anyone familiar is a fantastic feat. It actually gives you 2 general feats. The first is Precedent Planner, and the second is Precedent Consumable. And what each lets you do is basically just retcon a situation and say, oh no, I actually did have this, as you pull it out of your bag. The levels of the items have to be pretty low, which means, you're not pulling out any flaming, greater striking short sword or anything like that. But if, you wanted to pull out something, first level scroll, hey, you've got that, which means effectively you have access to every spell of first level or lower, which is really nice. And Precedent Consumable does a similar thing wherein it lets you pull out any consumable. So you have access to pretty much any potion of appropriate level that you can pull out of your bag, and you have it all of a sudden. The core of this build, and what I really love about it, is it's centered around this idea of just being a team player and figuring out the story and figuring out of combat situations. The Investigator itself is built with a lot of mechanics that help you within combat, but I also wanted to add to that a little bit by giving my team items as they need them, and then as we go through situations, no matter whether or not I took really great notes on the situation or not, I can just, hey, walk into a room, notice something odd. Oh, are we going down a wrong lead, or is that a red herring? GM has to tell you, oh, do we need an item? Pull it out. And I think Liam really shines in that space.
So, Liam?
Yes.
Did you become an investigator just so your GM wouldn't yell at you for not taking notes?
That is an excellent question. Thank you.
Noted.
Yeah, I mean, the investigator actually is great for note takers because the devise a stratagem that's included in the build. Devise a stratagem basically lets you, follow a lead, and if the subject of the lead you're pursuing, which lets you make an attack roll as a free action and save it, so you can choose whether or not you want to use it or throw it away. The investigator comes with a lot of combat built into it, so the other half of that is what I tried to really fill out.
So, hi again. I am Kendall. I'm playing Nock. I basically created Nock for our Age of Ashes campaign, which, if you don't know, Age of Ashes is set in Breach Hill, located near the Five Kings Mountain. When I made this character, I actually decided on his name first. I based his name off of the Tommyknockers myth, where spirits live in mines and either help or hinder the miners who work there. That basically became the inspiration for my character. And so I decided to make him a rock dwarf from the Five Kings Mountain that was actually kind of scrawny and not super strong. So he couldn't really help in the mines, but he wanted to still do his part for his community. So instead, he learned alchemy and became a bomber so that he could make mining just that much easier for everyone and still help out his community. When I picked the alchemist class, I wanted to do something complicated, but not too complicated. I didn't really want to keep track of spells or stuff like that. I ended up having to keep track of formulas anyways, but in a way, being a bomber is a simplistic combat style, but still has various details that I can choose from, which breaks the routine that I really, really love. So when you first become an alchemist, you get quite a few things, actually. You first get a formula book where you get to put your formulas that you learn. You get 4 formulas plus 2 from whatever background you can choose. And as a bomber, I got to choose 2 of the common bombs. So I took Alchemist Fire and Acid Flask, the ones that would most help out in mines, right? So when you first become an alchemist, you can only make 2 bombs per 1 batch of infused reagents. But at level 5, you gain field discovery, which if you are a bomber, you can make 3 bombs per 1 batch of infused reagents, which significantly ups your bomb output, which is really great, especially when you're a bomber. Nock took Quick Bomber as well at level 1, which allows you to both draw and strike with a bomb in the same action. As a bomber, I also do splash damage with my equipment, such as Alchemist Fire and Acid Flask. Pretty much all of my bombs do splash. At level 4, I can take Calculated Splash, which allows me to deal splash damage equal to my intelligence modifier instead of the specified splash damage. At level 6, you then also get Directional Bombs, which allows you to control how big your splash is. It also lets you do, instead of a square splash, do 15-foot cones. So if your allies are around your enemy, you can make sure that they are not hit with the splash damage. Splash damage is also really great for those times when you are fighting a creature or someone who is way above your level. You are not going to hit them. But hey, even if you fail, you can still do at least a little bit of splash damage. That's another thing that I love about Alchemists, because there are so many different types. Alchemist Fire, Acid Flask, Bottle Lightning, Thunderstone, Blight Bombs, all that good stuff that deals different types of damage. If you encounter a creature that is weak to a certain type of damage, you can deal significant amounts of that damage using just one bomb. And even if you miss, you can still deal that splash damage. And some bombs even allow you to deal persistent damage. So that increases your damage output every single turn. If you fight a human, you can deal persistent fire damage and persistent acid damage, make them flat-footed with a bottled lightning, and slow them with a frost vial. You can do so many things to a person with all of the different types of ammo that you have, and it just makes the simple style of I'm going to throw a bomb at them so much better.
I think we saw this in a game the other day where we were playing against an enemy that had weakness 20 cold, and Nock was throwing frost vials, dealing 6 splash damage, but that became 26 splash damage, cold damage, and she could throw it, 3-4 times around, which meant that even when those attacks missed, as long as they don't critically miss, they were dealing, 26 damage, and then when she hit, it dealt more. So that stuff really stacks up. Throw on top of that, we were talking today earlier about how you can, with sticky bomb feat, deal persistent cold damage. So if something is weak against cold, taking, cold damage persistent every turn in addition to their weakness, that can really stack up fast. And I think that's one of the areas that alchemists shine.
I also can't wait for the moment when Nock turns to level 7, actually, because then he gets perpetual infusions, which basically allows Nock to make infinite bombs. He is allowed to choose 2 formulas. They are lesser formulas, so you can choose either Acid Flask, Alchemist Fire, Bottle Lightning, etc. You can choose 2 of them, and you can basically use quick alchemy to make that bomb forever without using infused reagents.
So Nock, what parts of the Pathfinder 2 system do you think really shine within your character?
I think the versatility of your character really shines through the alchemist. In our Age of Ashes campaign, I also gave him an archetype of ranger, and that just made all of his alchemist and bombing abilities that much better. I can ignore range. As a ranger, Nock can ignore range penalties when he is throwing bombs. He can use hunt prey to facilitate recall knowledge checks in order to pinpoint a foe's weaknesses and even learn their resistances or immunities so that he knows which bombs not to use. It just really highlights the versatility that you can use in combat with your character. You can even throw crystal shards, which in the flavor description, it specifies there are pieces of glass shards sticking out of walls and the floor, so it can deal damage, or you can use the glass shards to climb on the walls.
And shout out to recall knowledge, which I think is an excellent use of anyone's action. Learning an enemy's weaknesses or resistance can have huge implications on combat for sure.
Even if you're only taking 1 point of damage, you immediately take the full value of your weakness. So if you're weak 20 to cold, if you take 1 point of cold damage from a splash from a bomb, you're taking that full 10 as well. So when an alchemist is able to really lock in, you're dealing good damage every single turn. And that's just awesome and incredible and very helpful at high levels. Trust us.
Oh yeah, I believe recently Nock was able to miss 3 times on an attack and do over 60 damage. It was bullshit. But
so on that note, Saf, why don't you introduce your character?
Hey everybody, my character is Saphira Al-Jazil, but she goes by Saf because Saphira is way too long to say and she doesn't have time for that. So I actually build my character slightly different from everyone else. I tend to come at them from a role-playing standpoint first. I find a character that I think is going to be interesting to play for a long time, a personality that's going to be fun to play for a long time, and then I just sort of stuff it into a class later on. And I was accused, unrightly so, of only playing brooding loner ex-nobles with long hair on a quest for their honor. Don't listen to them, it's not true. So I was challenged to create a character that is optimistic, extroverted, a street urchin with no daddy issues. So I came up with this character, Saphira, personality first, before coming up with the class. And so Saphira is built up to level 6 so far because she comes online at level 6. So first I'm going to walk you through some of the features that I chose for her, and then I'm going to walk you through some of that out of character stuff that I was just talking about. So I decided going into this campaign, one character type that I haven't played yet is a ranged damage dealer. So naturally the class I chose was Monk. And that is because of Pathfinder feats. So you see, when you pick your class at level 1, you're going to get a set progression of a certain number of core abilities. For example, the Monk's core ability is Flurry of Blows, which does exactly what you think it does. It lets you attack multiple times for, less actions. But every feat that you take thereafter affects how you're going to use that. So the biggest feat that I take is my level 1 stance, and it's called Monastic Archer Stance. And essentially what this lets me do is do all the same things that monks do with their fist, but with a bow. So I get to do my Flurry of Blows, but instead I shoot arrows extra fast rather than punching extra fast. At level 2, I take Stunning Fist, which again, when I use Flurry of Blows, if they both hit, the enemy is stunned if they fail their save afterwards. I get to do that with a bow now. So I don't know if I'm shooting around the heart and they're just paralyzed, but it's super cool, and it's a very different way of playing a monk because of that choice that I made there at level 1. The level 4 feat that I take is Deflect Arrow, and again, it sounds pretty much what it is. Somebody shoots at you and you use your monk reflexes and you grab it right out of the air. Since I'm an archer, I'm hoping I'm not going to be in melee combat that much, right? DM, please don't come and punch me because I don't have a lot of constitution, so don't hurt me.
I will always come after you.
Okay, that's not what I wanted to hear, but I appreciate it. Just because you see that I'm a valuable player and I know what I'm doing. I see you. So this ability lets me use one of my reactions to make myself harder to hit from a ranged attack, which I'm hoping is going to be helpful when, they're sort of counter-firing at me. But then level 6. And this is really where I think it's absolutely the best part of Pathfinder. I don't take a monk feat at level 6. So, backing up again, there are class feats, and then there are these rad things called archetypes. And if you don't know what an archetype is, we got some great videos on Deadly D8. Highly recommend you go check them out. An archetype is essentially a mini class. I think it's probably the best way of putting it. Pathfinder is not a game where multiclassing means you become less of one thing to become slightly more of another thing. I'm not losing out really on being a monk. I'm still a monk, but I'm gaining the ability of this archetype. And what I chose was Eldritch Archer. So essentially this dedication lets me cast a couple of spells, and it also gives me this ability called Eldritch Shot, which uses up all of the actions that I have on a turn. So it's a big shot. And what I do is essentially take my spell and I put it into my arrow. And if my arrow hits, my spell hits. And all the damage gets added together. And I'm not losing anything that makes being a monk cool. I'm not losing any of that kind of, kung fu, stereotypical stuff that, you see in these movies. I'm just gaining this additional thing that happens to synergize really, really well with my bow, because I'm going to be able to deal just massive amounts of damage by the late levels. Now, out of character, as I said, I was challenged to build a very happy, sort of extroverted character. So I go hard down all of the different diplomacy feats. So also there are these things called skill feats that allow you to do more things with your skill. So if you have a plus, 15 in diplomacy, there are a bunch of skills that will let you use that diplomacy to do more things. So one of the first things I take at level 3 is this amazing general feat called Bon Mot. It is fantastic, and essentially what it does is you launch an insightful quip at your foe. You roll a diplomacy check against their will save, and on a critical success, they take a -3 status penalty to a couple of their stats. On a success, you get a -2, etc., etc. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to use diplomacy in combat, but because I've decided I'm going to try and go down the sort of diplomacy line, I took that at level 3. At level 4, I took Group Impression, so that I'm able to talk more guards out of arresting us, when we inevitably break the law by doing something. It's not me, I swear. I'm not the lawbreaker, guys. So it just allows me to use my diplomacy on more people at once. And at level 5, I take a feat called Courteous Comeback because my character grew up in the Kelishite sort of culture. And again, it's another sort of get out of jail free, use your diplomacy if you piss everybody off, and maybe, just maybe, if you roll good, you won't get arrested. So fingers crossed that that's all gonna work.
Jamie, I can tell that as you were building your character, you really were integrating skills into them as well, which I don't know if any of us hit on skills quite so much yet. It's interesting to see that yours mostly revolves around diplomacy. So how did you work to build up your diplomacy stat a little bit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I have to admit, full credit goes to the phenomenal web and Android app, Path Builder. I'm very, very bad at sort of long-term planning, so there's been a lot of tweaks. So one of the things that I went into and that I've discovered from my other characters is that even though a lot of the low level 1, level 3, level 3, level 5 skill feats are really, really good, those high level skill feats are awesome, but a lot of them do have prerequisites. So I personally did intentionally focus on things that use diplomacy. So I start off with pretty decent charisma because diplomacy, ultimately procs off of your charisma. So I'm a half elf as well, so I'm getting these bonuses to charisma. At level 3 is the first time I get to increase any of my skills, and the first one that I increase is diplomacy. And I immediately take a feat that procs off of diplomacy. And essentially most times when I get a chance after that, I'm going to be boosting diplomacy as much as possible because that will allow me to take higher level diplomacy feats. It will make my older feats more useful, more successful. So it was a very intentional choice at the beginning I already had a good diplomacy and I was going to just keep working on that so that I can get some of those really good feats at the end.
Yeah, and this really shows, I think, how wonderfully blended everything is in the Pathfinder system. You can increase your diplomacy, and what's that going to mean for all of your skills? What options are going to be made available to you? How can you integrate that into your character? And you can be a giant nerd like all of us and be thinking very deeply about where you want your character to be at this level and where you want it to be in future levels. But something else I think Pathfinder 2 shines in is even if you have no idea what you're doing, you're going to make a character that works. You're going to make a character that's fully viable and functional and maybe not exactly 100% optimal, but not too far from it. You never have to worry about, rocket tag and Pathfinder 2. Everyone's about dealing around the same damage, hitting about at the same level, AC around the same point, but everyone just has all these small flavorful changes that really make their character unique.
And Liam, you also sort of hit on it when you're talking about your character. The way Paizo writes their adventure paths, there is a lot of time to shine outside of combat.
For sure.
And as we are learning, as we get to sort of the end of this adventure path that's taken 6 books, we're on the 6th book, we're right at the beginning of it, we're seeing results from decisions we made in book 2, diplomacy checks that we succeeded on, intimidation checks that we failed on. We see those sort of decisions echoing literally almost a year later. So Paizo is really good about making sure that those kind of out of combat skill checks, your diplomacy checks, society, knowing how the world works, like that, it does matter and it has a huge impact by the end of the game.
Heck yeah. And last but not least, we have Greenmeadow. Greenmeadow, do you want to tell us a little bit about your build?
Yeah, so just generally when I build a character, I don't really build for either roleplay or the deep crunching. I just kind of find something that I like and I roll with it. Some things may be unoptimal, but generally I do it all for the gram. And I might have dated myself there, but here we are. And kind of just jumping a little bit from what was said into my character, you can, you plan for high levels, but you can still have a lot of fun at low levels. So at the moment, or this rendition of Greenmeadow is a leaf fleshy bard, And I don't know what there wouldn't be to love about a tiny, mechanically small, sentient plant. Only a couple feet tall, a cute little bard, and we think a lot of fun and cute and happiness, and Greenmeadow is a lot of those things. Greenmeadow is adorable, friendly, good, loved by all, but also terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And that's just amazing. At low levels, just in the first 2 levels, you take some versatile performance that lets me use intimidation. For intimidation, I can use performance to demoralize someone, and I take virtuistic performer as a bard feat, and I get those bonuses to performance. And again, another first level thing, taking intimidating glare, and put those all together, and you have this terrifying leaf-fleshy bard that can just glare at people and demoralize them.
As we mentioned earlier, demoralizing gives the fear condition, which is absolutely excellent in terms of debuffing an enemy.
And it only gets better. And then at level 3, you pick up a nice persona mask from Liam's shop, and then you get more bonuses to acting, and therefore for Greenmeadow being terrifying. And, I kind of just rolled with that, this terrifying tiny bard, tiny little leaf. And at 6th level, I picked up Dirge of Doom. And what is wonderful about that, as a spellcaster, you might not want to be so close to an enemy, but Dirge of Doom, a 30-foot emanation, no save, your enemies are frightened 1. Pair that with some other members of the party that can just, take advantage of that, hit hard, and you've got a nice little dynamic going on. Then, there are just some fun things that you can pick up as a bard. All 6th level or lower, 1st level. Again, you visit Liam and you get yourself a battle loot. Basically, you can bash people, not with a lot of damage, with your loot. And it stays together and you can play it afterwards. What's not to love about that? And then, another wonderful thing about being a Leshy, especially a leaf Leshy, at level 5, I can basically fly. I don't have a fly speed, but I take Leshy Glide, and then all I need is a roof to jump off of, and I'm flying. Just somehow get me into the air, can't take fall damage, I can glide through the air, and at level 5, that is an amazing thing to see. And also, this terrifying little leaf flying at you definitely scares away some enemies. And then there's the thing that I mentioned in the intro that some people might have picked up, the immortal thing. So it's not strictly rules as written, but that's mostly because there's nothing written about it. So largely due to having a GM that finds it as funny as I do. Leshies are immortal. They physically, their spirit just inhabits a temporary home. So once this temporary home, this manifested sentient body dies, the spirit just goes back. So you can't really die. There are some cases where your spirit can be attacked and your spirit can die, and in those cases, it may be permadeath for a Leshy. But otherwise, just goes back to the spirit plane. And it's a wonderful thing that we have made canon, but rules as written were not exactly wrong.
I love that idea of kind of building off of, what you're given and working with your DM, because that's kind of what the game's about. I think in one of the first pages of the book, they specifically point out that play this game however you want to have the most fun. In the end, it's up to the group to decide exactly how they want to play the game. And I think that's a good example of that.
Yeah, I genuinely love the idea that Greenmeadow just can't die. Like, I'm a GM that definitely embraces character death and am somebody that kind of wants that a part of their game. But to have this one PC that has, plot armor beyond plot armor. It's just hilarious to me. Like, we're on, I think, version 3 of Greenmeadow now, and
Spoilers.
Oh, yeah.
spoilers. You know, it's nice that Greenmeadow gets to come back as a different class if they would like to, and you know, it gives you know, Greenmeadow an opportunity to try something a little bit different this time around.
Greenmeadow, something I like that you pointed out was when you're deciding on a character, you find something that you like and then you roll with it. And I can't tell you how many times that's happened exactly to me. You know, I'll be flipping through the book and I'll find some random dumb item that I'm like, oh my gosh, you can make an entire character around this item. And the book is chock full of that. You know, so many feats, so many features, so many items, so many abilities that you can base an entire character around that's uniquely yours and uniquely, you know, lets this one aspect shine. I think that's something that really draws me to the game and has kept me there for sure. Hey Pathfinder fans, thanks for checking out our first Online at 6 video. Would you like to see the builds we used in this video to make our main characters? Down in the description I'm going to include a link that'll take you to all of our character builds. Let us know what you think, let us know if you have any comments, thoughts, opinions, things you would change, just whatever, we love hearing from you. So from all of us Online at Sixers, thank you very much for checking out our first episode. We have more coming for you, and have a fantastic Pathfinder filled day. Bye everyone.